What is going on, everybody, and welcome to the Thursday edition of the Stochastic NHL Strategy Show. I'm your host, Josh Harris. Have an 11-game slate to break down today. Talk about a couple winners last night. Daily deposit Frostback. About goddamn time. He got his goalie right with Darcy Kemper. He had, he 12x'd his money last night. He's a low-stakes grinder. You have to appreciate those fellas or ladies. Turning $650 into $75 is a pretty good feat. He outscored me. So, 144 in high stakes would have done some serious damage. Now, obviously, you always have one person be like, well, I would have won the 444. But yeah, if you didn't, you would have lost 444 instead of playing for $6. There's two sides to that coin, but congrats to Daily Deposit Frostback. We do love to see it. He actually shipped an NFL GPP a few weeks ago that boosted his bankroll. Now he gets another boost. Hopefully he can keep it going. Yeah, would have won $20K. Yeah. And Scarlett Johansson would have been my yoga instructor if I wasn't born a redhead. I don't know. But joining me, as always, Slim Clifford, break down the slate. What's going on?
That's okay. I don't even know where to go with that. Not a whole lot. Just another day. Frostback had a good night. Good for him. You had a good night too. Finished third. It was in the 444, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Josh finished third with Adam Fantilli coming through with the big Hattie. His first career hat trick. That line's looked really good since Monahan went down. I think that was, I thought he would do better with Marchenko than he would with the depth. I didn't think he'd do this well, obviously. They're back on the board here tonight, so we're going to be talking our Columbus Blue Jackets later, but interesting little 11-game slate. You and I were talking before the show. Obviously, we're going to go over the games one by one. There are a few chalky spots here. Unfortunately, we do have another Nashville-San Jose matchup after that debacle the other night. Obviously, there's always an appeal to the chalk because they're such good matchups, but I also think this is definitely a night where I'm not seriously considering them, at least not right now. Like I said, we'll go through the games one by one, but I think the slate is put pretty wide open, and I kind of like that for an 11-gamer.
Yeah, there's 4 lines currently projected in double digits. 3 of them, in my opinion, are easy fades in single entry, but we will talk about them. I did have a decent night last night. It was pretty funny because, I wasn't trying to play Fantilli, but, I power play stacked the Leafs, all 5 of them, so I needed a one-off center. And it's just the options in that range were just really bad. And the guy who runs the Stochastic NHL Twitter account, I'm not going to dox him, but he quote tweeted our show and said, he quoted me saying that Columbus 1 is in a very sneaky spot. Okay, that kind of makes my decision for me. So, thank you for paying attention to the show and using that quote. But yeah, we do have the Predators again, but luckily they went up almost $3,000 after that drudging of the Sharks, and it is Askarov in net. So we will discuss it at the end. We do have 11 games to get through. We should probably start getting through them because that's a big slate. But before we do, just want to extend a thank you to everyone who hangs out with us during these shows. The numbers this year have been ridiculously good. That is all you guys tuning in and supporting us. We hope we can, give you the best information we possibly can. We don't ever say you need to go premium. These shows will always remain free. But if you do want to take your game to the next level with premium, you can click the link in the chat, use promo code Stochastic15. That'll get you 15% off your first week or month of any subscription. Sims in most sports, NHL doesn't have Sims, but it could be in the works for next year. There are no promises, though. But for now, we have the top stacks, we have the projections, etc., and the Discord, which is invaluable in my opinion. But let's get into this with one of the worst games on the slate to start us off. The Ottawa Senators with a 3 total heading into Boston. The Bruins have a 2.5. I know it's early. I know we have 10 more games after this, but this game sucks. Using it early. Actually, I don't really mind the Ottawa side, but man, did Boston look bad last night. Not hard to look bad in New Jersey, but man, they look uninspired. Boston running, as far as we know, the running back, Pastrnak, Zacha, Geeky, Marchand, Coyle, Potois. Ottawa mixing up their lines in practice yesterday. Kachuk, Pinto, Giroux, Stützle, Batherson, Cousins, Grieg, Ostapachuk, and Perron, who's back in the lineup. Both these teams had an optional this morning. Obviously, Boston played yesterday, so if they're going to make line changes, we won't know till warm-ups. Interesting line changes for Ottawa here. Pinto with Kachuk does interest me. Pinto and Kachuk have played about 100 minutes this season, have been pretty good. Claude Giroux, despite him not shooting a lot recently, he is on the top power play unit. He is under $4,000. That line is 16,500, 7.7 top 2 stack, 9.2% projected ownership. I don't mind them in GPPs. Yes, Boston's gotten better defensively, and yes, the goalies have improved some, but man, this team, it was not Jim Montgomery's fault, is basically what I'm getting at there. So I don't mind Ottawa, the Kachuk line here at 16.5. I don't know if I'm going to get there in single entry. I haven't decided how I'm going to build yet. There are a lot of mid-range lines in play here tonight. There isn't a massively expensive line like Tampa 1 or Colorado 1, you know what I mean? So these mid-range lines are going to be in play. I just don't know if I'm going to prioritize Ottawa here. I don't mind that line. Stützle, Batherson, Cousins, it's fine because Stützle and Batherson are on the top power play unit. They've had a large sample together. A lot of that's probably with Brady Kachuk or Giroux. Nick Cousins doesn't do too much, but they are 14-3. You can do whatever you want with Nick Cousins. I prefer the Kachuk line. I know he's been scoreless, held off the score sheet in 8 games. His individual expected goals numbers in the Rangers game were very, very good. So he's generating. So I don't mind Ottawa 2 here. On the Boston side, that top line's coming in at 9%. I just listen, they put Linus Ullmark on the long-term IR. It's going to probably be Anton Forsberg here tonight. But Ottawa's generally been a good defensive team when Travis Hamonic is not on the top pair. So I don't have a ton of interest in Boston here, especially at 9%. If I'm going to pay 9% for a line in this game, I'm going to spend the extra $200 for Kachuk, Pinto, Giroux.
Yeah. Both, these lines are all priced relatively in the same area. I mean, Stützle, Batherson, Cousins is cheaper at 14,300, but the Kachuk line is 16.5. The Pastrnak line is 16.7. If you look at the list of lines that are on the board here tonight, there is a whole bunch of them between 15 and 17,000 or 15 and 18,000. Sorry. There's 12 of them. So when you consider that there are a bunch of and none of them are projecting for that high ownership. The only one over 10% is Minnesota. We'll get to them later, the second line, and they're under 11%. So there's not a lot of ownership on any of these lines. So at that point, you just got to kind of prioritize which ones that you want to go for. And I don't know if I would prioritize either line in a 5.5 total game. You know what I mean? I guess I agree with you. It would be either the Pastrnak line or the Kachuk line. Kachuk and Pinto, you're right. They have been able to create well together this year. 3.8 expected goals per 60 minutes at 5-on-5 and over 100 minutes together. That's pretty good. Tkachuk's had some trouble finishing. You mentioned that 1 goal in his last 10 games, but he does have 34 shots in that span. So like you said, he is generating. I think I prefer the Ottawa side here. And the reason I prefer the Ottawa side is that Boston penalty kill. That Boston penalty kill has just been bad all season. If you want to just if you want to look at the last 5 weeks, we'll start with the full season. Over the course of the full season, the only teams giving up more power play goals against on a per game basis than Boston have been Detroit and Calgary. So Boston's allowing the 3rd most power play goals against per game in the league this season, and also the 3rd most power play goals against per game in the league over the last 5 weeks. This penalty kill sucks. Now, Ottawa's power play's gone kind of cold over the last month. Norris is out. Giroux's on it. Whether Giroux helps or not, I guess we'll see. But it's a pretty good power play spot for Ottawa. They do draw a fair number of power play opportunities. So I guess I agree. I would go Tkachuk, Pinto, Giroux. If you want to take off Pinto, put in Stutzler for the power play correlation, I guess you can do that. I think it's Ottawa 2 I like best in this game. As a whole, I don't really like anything other than on the Boston side. One off Pasternak, always in play. I'll always say that. But it's the Ottawa side I like best. I don't really like either side here, though.
Yeah. Agreed. Montreal Canadiens with a 2.9 total heading into Detroit. The Wings have a 3.1 total. Patty Kane is out, so Vladimir Tarasenko is going to take his spot with DeBrincat and Kopp. He's also going to take his spot on the power play. So Detroit going Larkin, Raymond, Casper, DeBrincat, Kopp, Tarasenko. Montreal status quo here. Now, this is a good power play spot for both sides. I do have some concern that Kane is missing from the Wings power play. Now, you can say whatever you want about Kane at 5-on-5, and it's probably warranted at this point in his career. He's not the player he was, 4 or 5 years ago. But on the power play, he is still an excellent passer, and he is dangerous. Tarasenko at this stage of his career isn't Patty Kane. So I do worry a little bit from that standpoint. They still have Raymond, obviously, Larkin, etc. I do worry about the fluidity of the passing when Kane isn't, because they kind of run the passing through Kane on that power play. So I like Tarasenko's he's a good playmaker. I don't know. I watched him on the power play with the Rangers. He just kind of hangs out on the sidewall looking for a shot. So it's still a good power play matchup from the point that Montreal takes a ton of penalties. Their power play has improved by, shots allowed metrics and all of that. They still allow the same amount of power play goals a game just because they're the sheer volume of penalties they're taking. I do have a bit of concern about that power play. I still think, Detroit 1 is fine. If you want to leave off Casper and add in DeBrincat, I think that's fine. Now with Tarasenko taking Kane's spot, that second line is 11,800. We don't have that in top stacks right now. That line is probably going to see 5% plus ownership. Listen, I don't want to play that line if it's negatively leveraged. I don't care that Tarasenko's on the top unit. Maybe he's fine, you know what I mean? But with Kane there, if they got 5 power plays, whatever, it wouldn't shock me to see them go 2 of 5, something like that. With Tarasenko, I do worry a little bit, but at that price, 11.8, I guess they're fine. But my interest is more on the Montreal side here. Montreal 1, I think, is in play at 17,100, 2.2% projected ownership. Larkin, Raymond, Casper have not been good defensively. It's not a huge shock. Since Simon Edmondson got taken off the top pair, their defensive pairs haven't been great. So I do really like Montreal 1 here. The caveat is it's a good power play spot, and I would want Line A in there just because Line A is ridiculous on the power play. So I think what I would do is leave off Slavkovsky or Caulfield and add in Laine. Like, you're going to hear me talk about Montreal like a broken record. It's going to be the same thing. I like Montreal 1. I want Laine in because it's a good power play spot. I'd leave off Slavkovsky or Caulfield, depending on your price tolerance. I would leave Suzuki, and I'd probably add Hudson. I also think Gallagher, Dvorak, Anderson is a fine, super cheap filler. The problem is there isn't like a $25,000 line that you need. But if you do need a cheap two-man because you want a power play stack Minnesota or something, I think they're fine. So I prefer Montreal 1, but I don't mind some sort of Detroit power play stack.
Yeah, I'll start on the Detroit side. I don't mind Larkin, Raymond, Casper. The reason is, one, like, they're not that expensive. They're right in line with Montreal. Like, I would rather play Larkin, Raymond, Casper than play Boston here tonight, let's say. That line, you mentioned they haven't been good defensively. You're right. They haven't. But they have been good offensively, right? 85 minutes together under McClellan, 73 shot attempts, 3.7 expected goals, 4.2 actual goals per 60 minutes. Larkin's been over 3 shots per game. Lucas Raymond's 2.5 shots per game in his last 10. You know, one of the issues with Raymond DFS for like the last season and a half is that even if he's produced well, like goals and assists at times, you know, this season he's over a point per game, doesn't put up a lot of shots. 2.5 shots per game, I can kind of live with that. You know, and Casper has a reasonable price. You get 2 out of 3 on the top power play unit. So if it does come through, you know, they're one of them, if not two, both of them are going to be involved in all likelihood. And I don't mind the matchup against Montreal 1. Like, Montreal 1, the big turnaround for them has been offensively. It hasn't been on the defensive side of the puck. It's kind of like Washington in that sense. Only Logan Thompson's been, you know, a top 2 goalie in the NHL this season. So that Montreal top line, their last 10 games, 3.4 expected goals against per 60, like 60 shot attempts against per 60. They've really been giving it up. So I don't mind Detroit 1. For me, it's both top lines. Now, I would probably rather play the Montreal top line just because they're perfectly correlated. Like, that's the one advantage that I would give them over Detroit. And I feel the same way you do about Laine. I don't know if I would play Montreal and leave Laine off of it in a power play matchup like this. Like, Detroit's penalty kill was bad under Lalonde, and Detroit's penalty kill is still as bad under McClellan, like a bottom 5 penalty kill in the league. So it's a really good spot for the Montreal power play. They do draw power play opportunities. So if you want to take out Slavkovsky and put in Laine, take off Caulfield, put in Laine, something like that, I think that's the way I would go. It's both top lines for me. I like this game on both sides. I think if you ask me to pick one or the other, I would probably take Montreal just for the perfect correlation, but I think both top lines are very much in play here. I don't have as much interest in the depth unless it's like a one-off Patrick Laine or something like that.
Yeah, I agree. I also prefer the Montreal top line, but neither here nor there. Philadelphia Flyers, they 2.6 total. Heading into New York, the Rangers have a 3 total. Lines are actually the same. They're going Panarin, Trocheck, Lafreniere, Zibanejad, Smith, Cooley, Kreider, Hedel, Kaliev. Flyers going Konechny, Tippett, Frost, Forrester, Cates, Brink, Mitchkov, Couturier, Farabee. Now, dare I say the Rangers have been better defensively lately. I think it also helps that Igor has been locked in. A lot of ails get cured when Igor is shutting people out. But I see 4.4% projected ownership on that Konechny, Tippett, Frost line. Now, at home, the Rangers are going to send out Miller and Borgen against them. They don't hard match from a forward standpoint, but the Trocheck line is probably going to see a fair bit of that line. That line has been decent defensively, nothing to write home about. The issue I have with the Flyers' top line is twofold. They aren't creating a lot, and they're shooting a high percentage. So, like, they're scoring, but it's not because they're creating good chances, right? So, and then 2, Igor's in net. So 4.4%, I guess, is fine at 16.8. There's other lines I prefer to prioritize in single entry. In MME, you know, it's a spot maybe I'd come in at the field. I'd probably be under 2-3%, because their power play also sucks. Now, the Rangers' penalty kill per expected goals against is actually worse than the Flyers, but like Igor has been really, really good of late. And when he's rolling, it makes it really hard to stack a team against him on the road on an 11-game slate. If I was going to stack a line, it would be Cates, Brink, Forster. But, I don't know if there's a tremendous need for a line under 10K. There are things you can do with power play stacks. So like a Cates Brink, a Cates Forster, something like that is fine. In a small sample, Mitchkov, Couturier, Farabee have been really, really good, but I'm not going to bank my night on the Flyers here. The Rangers side's a little bit more interesting, but not really. Like, I know the Flyers have goaltending issues, their penalty kill sucks, and this and that, but the Rangers top line is now 20,400. And they took Lafreniere off the power play for Kreider, so you're not getting full correlation there. They've gone up 3,000. They're going up against a decent defensive team with a bad goalie, so at 20,400, it's a tough sell for me. If you want to get there in MME because they're coming in at 1.7% projected and you want 2-3% and you're 150, sure. But in single entry at that price, it's going to be a pass for me. The two depth lines are a little interesting because they've both played fairly well. The Zibanejad Smith Cooley line is generating a ton, but they can't hit water if they fell out of a boat. Their shooting percentage is atrocious. Like, they're fine if you think they can hit the net. And I mean, I'm sure Urson can cure that, but I think I would defer to Hedl, Kreider, Kaliev at 10,900. Kreider's on the top power play. Philip Hedl is their highest upside center. I'd say Trocheck's their best center. He's just a consistent player, but Hedl is probably their best ceiling center. Kaliev has been shooting. That's his gig. So at 10,900, I think my favorite line in this game is Hedl, Kreider, Kaliev.
Yeah. I don't have a ton of interest in the Flyers, especially that top line. Like, that top line, 16,800. It's one of those lines in that 15 to 18K range that I talked about earlier. I would rather play Detroit. I would rather play Montreal. I'd rather play Ottawa. There's another line later in the slate that we'll get to that I'd also probably rather play. Like, there are just other options. I think power play, not very good. As you mentioned, the Rangers penalty kill, not great, but Igor's, as you said, has been locked in. Your point about them not creating, that top line for the Flyers, 52 shot attempts, 2.1 expected goals per 60 in 100 minutes together, nearly 100 minutes together. 4.8 goals per 60 shooting 20%. Like, that's the problem. It's like, if they're shooting 10%, they're a below average scoring team, and 10% is a pretty high rate for a 5-on-5 line, especially what I would consider a non-elite line, like outside of Tampa Bay or Toronto or things like that. So they're due for a pretty big regression. So I'm out. If you want to one-off Mitchkov, like you said, that line has been good. Once you get into the second and third pairs for the Rangers, especially, facing Lindgren or whatever, maybe they can be had. Like, I'm fine with that. Like you said, a Cates, Forster, two-man, something like that. I think that's okay if you need it, but I'm not targeting the Flyers here tonight. The Rangers side, the thing with the top line is they've gone up $3,000 in 2 weeks, which is kind of incredible when you think that Lafreniere is off the power play and getting less ice time now. It's like, thanks for that. The Flyers defense has been really good. When they've been healthy and everybody's been in the lineup, they've been pretty good. Just over the last 5 weeks, the Flyers' second lowest expected goals against per 60 in the league. And because the goaltending's been better, seventh lowest actual goals against per 60 in the league. You're looking at teams like Florida and St. Louis and New Jersey in line with them. So, as long as Urson doesn't completely fall apart, this looks like it's going to be a low-scoring game. It does have a 5.5 total, so that's not a big surprise. I think Rangers 1 is MME for me. I agree with you. The line I have interest in is Hedl, Kreider, Kaliev, just because if you are playing Minnesota or Pittsburgh or something like that later, maybe you might need a 10 or an 11K line. Hedl and Kaliev have been solid together. Kreider's back on the power play, so you get that. I think I agree with you that Rangers 3 is basically the only thing I have a lot of interest in here. in a single entry or 3 max or 5 max or something like that. Rangers 1 is definitely in play, but when you're looking at that price range, there are other lines I'd rather play in that price range that we'll get to later. So for me, that being MME only.
Our Columbus Blue Jackets disrespected again by Vegas with a 2.2 total. Heading into Carolina, the Hurricanes have a 3.8 total. Carolina should not be a minus 400 favorite against any team in the NHL, except maybe the Blackhawks and Sharks. Certainly not our Columbus Blue Jackets. They ran over the Leafs last night. But anyway, I would imagine Columbus runs back their lines. They did say that Cole Sillinger is a game-time decision here tonight. If he's out, Luca Del Belbulas will be in between Johnson and Van Riemsdyk, and they'll go 11-7. If he's in, Sillinger will take his spot on Columbus 2. Carolina going Aho, Svechnikov, Blake, Jarvis, Stahl, Martinook, Netchis, Kotkaniemi, Robertson. So, as much as I want to go back to Columbus 1 here tonight, they're 18-5, 4.7% top 2 stack, and they're going to see the Stahl line. Stahl, Martinook, Jarvis have been excellent this season, both ends of the ice. Like, as much as I want to go back to Columbus 1 here, in single entry, I'm not going to do it. If I'm making 150, maybe I have, 1 or 2 just out of pure copium, you know what I mean? Like, that they do it again. This is just like the Stahl line, just not it right now. Like, if it was Svechnikov with Stahl and Martinook, yeah, maybe I consider it. But like Jarvis, Stahl, and Martinook in 150 minutes this year, 1.6 expected goals against per 60, 0.8 actual. That's just meat grinder shit. So like, I'm out on them. If you want, like, I'm probably just out on Columbus in general, and I hate it. But if I have to be honest with myself, I'm out on Columbus. Carolina's an interesting story here. They have the highest total on the slate. I think it's going to be Danil Tarasov in net tonight. I'm not a huge fan of these lines. Like Aho, Svechnikov, Blake is fine. At 16.4, 9.3% projected ownership. It's just like there's so many lines in that range. And I don't love them. Like, they're good, but they're not great. I'd rather play Montreal 1 around that price range. Whether I want to play them over Ottawa, it's a debate. I think the line from Carolina that I'd want to play is Stahl, Martinook, Jarvis. 3.2 expected goals for per 60, 2.8 actual. They're going to get that top line matchup for Columbus. They've been better offensively. They're still not great defensively. Back-to-back on the road. You get Jarvis on the top power play unit. Jarvis plays like 20 minutes. So that's probably the line I would prioritize the most. I'm fine with the Aho, Svechnikov, Blake line. There's just so many lines in that price range. I don't know how I'm going to cut them down in single entry if I go into that price range.
Yeah, hate to say it, also out on Columbus. Back-to-back on the road going into Carolina to face that Stahl line is just a really tough spot. If this is like 6 games, I'd be giving it a lot more consideration, but 11 games, it's just a pass for me. On the Carolina side, they did say that Shane Gostisbehere is going to be a game-time decision. Whether he's in or out, actually, even if he's out, like Sean Walker, he's down to, we'll talk defenseman later. He's at 3,100. That's 1,600 cheaper than Gostisbehere. If you power play stack Carolina with Sean Walker, it's honestly not that expensive. You know what I mean? It's less than $30K for the entire power play, especially if Sean Walker starts. And, Columbus's penalty kill has been better, generally not great. The Carolina power play has really missed Gostisbehere, I think. So if he's back, because I don't really like the line, like I agree with you. If I'm playing an even strength line, it's probably the Stahl line. But I think this is a spot where I don't mind a power play stack. Columbus is back-to-back on the road. we love these guys, but I do worry that they might have a little bit of a letdown defensively. Like the goaltending has been really, really good lately. Merzlikins has been really good over the last few weeks. It's kind of hidden the fact that the defense has given up some pretty good opportunities. It's a good power play spot for Carolina in general, especially if Gostisbehere is back in the lineup. Even if he's not, I'm fine with Sean Walker running things. So I would probably power play stack Carolina. Again, if you just want to go for a cheap line or something, Stahl's fine. They're at 3.2 expected goals, 2.8 actual goals for 60 minutes. I just worry with the top line. Like I like Jackson Blake. I worry he doesn't last the whole game or even play a lot of minutes. Andrei Svechnikov has literally 2 shots per game over his last 20 games. Like the guy's just not shooting. Don't know what's going on there. So I guess the Stahl line, but I think it's a power play stack I like best, and just kind of hope that the Carolina power play goes like 2 for 3 or 2 for 4 or something like that here tonight. So it is a good power play spot. I think that's what I like best out of this game. Not going to lie to you, even with the 3.8 total, there's not a lot that I'm really excited about stacking from the Carolina sides. One-off forwards, certainly the defensemen are in play, but full stack, I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you there. Just feels weird, but they're a minus 400 favorite. Vegas Golden Knights with a 3.2 total heading into St. Louis. The Blues have a 2.8. Vegas going Eichel, Stone, Barbashev, Hurdle, of Olofsson. Carlson is out. He's week to week, so we'll have to see what those third and fourth lines are going to be. Not that I have any interest in the bottom 6 of Vegas. St. Louis going Kyrou, Holloway, Shen, Thomas, Neighbors, Saad, Buchnevich, Sundqvist, Torpachenko for some ungodly reason. Now, I'll start on the Blues side since it's easier. The only line I would have interest in is Kyrou, Holloway, Shen. They have been very, very good this season under both coaches. In a 225-minute sample, they will see that Eichel, Stone, Barbashev line. That line is fine defensively. I'd say tiny bit better than league average. But at 14.8, they're a little bit cheaper than the bevy of lines in that mid-16 range, coming in a little bit negatively leveraged. They are fully correlated, but Vegas just doesn't take penalties. But they do play a fair share of minutes. So I don't mind them in that $14,000, $15,000 range at 6.3%. I don't know if I'm going to get there in single entry, but they're on the list. And the list is long tonight, but they're on the list. I don't have a ton of interest in Thomas Neighbors, Saad. I don't want to badmouth Saad because the last time we did that, he had like 98 DK points. Buchnevich on the third line is weird, and I have no interest there. The Vegas side is a little bit more interesting. You're coming in with almost no ownership. Now, Eichel, Stone, Barbashev's up over $20,000, Stone being $7,400 and Eichel $9,100. Like outside of the first 6 weeks of the season when they were running hotter than the sun, they really haven't done anything. Like they're not creating a ton. 2.43 expected goals for per 60 in a 250-minute sample. 3.77 actual because the first 6 weeks of the season, I think they were shooting like 25% or even higher, something ridiculous like that. And the Shen, Holloway, Kyrou line has been pretty good defensively. So I think I'm out on Vegas 1 in single entry. And MME, fine. You want to get a little bit short. The line I have interest in is Hurdle of Olofsson. 61 minutes together, 2.5 expected goals, 4.9 actual. So they're running hot, but they are 15-8. They avoid that Holloway line. You get Hurdle and Dorofeev on the top power play unit. Olofsson obviously is a shooter. So even if their shooting percentage comes down a bit, they're still creating decently. So it would be Hurdle, Dorofeev, Olofsson for me. Kyrou, Holloway, Shen is in play. I just don't know if I'm going to get there.
So I agree on Kyrou, Shen, Holloway. I think that's the only line I really have interest in from the St. Louis side. Like, you're right. They've been good under both coaches. I was looking at just under Jim Montgomery, 3.2 expected goals, 3.9 actual goals per 60. They're skating 18 to 19 minutes. They're correlated on the power play. There's a lot to like here about that line, especially where they're under 15K and like their ownership's a little higher than top two stack, 6.3% ownership, 4.8% top two stack, but pretty close. So I think that's perfectly fine. You know, if you do need one of those mid-price lines a little bit lower than the 16, 17K lines we were talking about earlier, I think this would be near the top of the priority list. It's the only thing I have interest in from the St. Louis side. The Vegas side is where things get a little interesting for me, because I agree. Like I agree with you. I do like Hurdle, Dorofeyev, Olofsson, like as a line. 2.4 expected goals per 60 minutes in their time together this season. Dorofeyev, he has, I think it's 33 shots in his last 10 games. Like he's been getting really involved in the offense, both at 5-on-5 and on the power play. This is what I'll say about the Vegas top line is that no, they're not creating well, but two things. One, Jack Eichel is at like 3.7 shots per game over his last 20 games or something like that. Like that was a problem with him earlier in the season, is that he was basically Nathan McKinnoning things where he wasn't shooting a ton, but he was putting up like 5 assists every 3 games or something like that. But now he's shooting a lot more. I do like to see that. The other thing is they're going to see a lot of that Robert Thomas, Brandon Saad matchup, and Robert Thomas and Brandon Saad just have not played well together this season, and it doesn't matter which coach it's been under. 85 minutes together, 70 shot attempts against per 60 without Pavel Buchnevich on the line with them. 2.9 expected goals, 2.9 actual goals against per 60. Those are just bad defensive numbers. That's a pretty good matchup for Vegas 1. And if you look at the St. Louis power play, Joel Hofer's been a lot worse than Jordan Binnington has on the penalty kill. Or I meant to say this, the St. Louis penalty kill. Hofer's been a lot worse on the penalty kill. Now, whether that sustains itself over the next 3 months, we're going to find out. But, you know, if Vegas can get a couple power plays and solve Hofer at even strength here tonight, then they can run over the Thomas line at 5-on-5. So, in general, I'm not a big fan of the super expensive lines tonight. There is one we'll talk about later, actually in the very next game, that I like better. But of the 5 lines over 20K, the even strength lines, this is number 2 on my priority list. Number 1 is in the next game, but I would certainly rather play Vegas than the Rangers here tonight. And I really like the 5-on-5 matchup. I think the power play matchup is better than it looks. So I like both Vegas lines. Depending what you want to do with your lineup, go with one or the other. I would generally lean towards the top line just for ice time and for shooting purposes, but I think both are in play. So for me in this game, it goes St. Louis 1, Vegas 1, Vegas 2 in my priority list.
Utah with a 2.7 total heading into Minnesota. The Wild have a 3.2. There was like a petition at the beginning of the season to call Utah the Yetis, but like they've hit quite a roadblock apparently. So Jake has started a petition for the Soakers. Please sign his petition. You can add him at Jake Hari on Twitter. Kaprizov and Jared Spurgeon back for Minnesota. That is great news if you are a Wild fan. Minnesota going Kaprizov, Zuccarello, Rossi, Boldy, Eriksson, Ek, Hartman. Utah going Keller, Cooley, Schmaltz, Hayton, Doan, Michelli. So with Kaprizov and Spurgeon back, they both go to the top power play unit. The power play is Kaprizov, Zuccarello, Boldy, Eriksson, Ek, Spurgeon. Brock Faber onto the second unit. Marco Rossi also onto the second unit. So with Minnesota getting healthy, Joe Eriksson, Ek, Boldy, Hartman are going to take top competition here, and that's Keller, Cooley, Schmaltz. Now, yes, Mikhail Sergachev is out again tonight, but you know John Marino is back. This is a pretty tough 5-on-5 matchup. Utah is a pretty good 5-on-5 team defensively. The issue is their penalty kill isn't very good, and they take a lot of penalties. Eriksson, Ek, Boldy, Hartman coming in 10.8% at 16.9. That's just a lot for me. Like Eriksson Ek had issues with his shot volume earlier in the season. Maybe he cures that, but At 10.8% projected, I'm probably going to take a pass on Minnesota 2 here for a couple reasons. One that I just mentioned about Joel Eriksson shooting. 2, Kaprizov, Zuccarello, Rossi are coming in almost half the ownership here. Now, the 5-on-5 matchup isn't great, but it's a Kaprizov line. He is back, and he's coming in low owned in a decent total and a pretty good power play spot. I think if I was going to stack a line in this game, it would be Minnesota 1, Kaprizov, Zuccarello, Rossi. Now, if you just want to do some sort of power play stack, I guess that's fine. If you want to leave off Rossi, do Kaprizov, Zuccarello, Spurgeon, just straight up one-offing Kaprizov is completely fine here. I think that's something I'd be interested in. But if I had a full stack line, I still think it would be Minnesota 1 here. I know Rossi isn't on the top power play anymore, but he has had a good season, arguably better than Joel Eriksson Ek. So, Minnesota 1 for me. If you want to do Minnesota 2 for the power play, sure. But that ownership, I'm going to go to Minnesota 1. On the Utah side, Minnesota's penalty kill still sucks. That's an evergreen statement. So I do have a little bit of interest here in Keller, Cooley, Schmaltz. They've been good together, creating 2.5 expected goals, but 5.7 actual. They've been running a little hot, you could say. But, if you're going to give them a decent opportunity on the power play, I think I would take a couple of stabs on them in MME. Utah 2 is a little interesting at 10,600. I'd probably throw them in the basket with the Rangers third line if you need a $10,000, $11,000 line. They have been very good in a smallish sample at both ends of the ice, so I don't mind them as a filler, but I think my favorite line in this game is Minnesota 1.
Yeah, I'll be quicker on Utah. I just don't like them at all here tonight. Spurgeon coming back makes a big difference. The Faber middle, we talk about how good Spurgeon and Brodin are defensively, and the Faber Middleton defensive pair, has defensive numbers similar to the Los Angeles Gavrikov Anderson pair that we talk about, similar to the Siegenthaler Kovacevic pairing that we were talking about. And so do Chisholm and Spurgeon. Both those defense pairs have been elite defensively this season. And Gustafson's in net. Not that Fleury's been bad. Fleury's been a little bit better of late, but Philip Gustafson is having a really, really good season for Minnesota. He's had a few rough starts lately, but Edmonton, Vegas, Colorado, they're not exactly Utah. So I'm out on Utah. For me, this is a Minnesota game, and it's Minnesota 1 that I was alluding to earlier that I like best of the 20K plus lines. That Minnesota top line this season, 2.9 expected goals, 4.1 actual goals per 60 minutes. Rossi's not on the power play. He has 40 points this season, and only 9 have been on the power play, so fewer than 25%. It's not like he's been even if he wasn't on the power play, he would still be on pace for a 56 or 57 point season with 20 goals. That's with no power play production. And you could still get something on the second unit for whatever ice time they get. He could also just get moved back onto the top power play at some point. They have done that as well this season. So they've been really good at 5-on-5. Marino coming back helps Utah defensively. Sergachev and, Sean Durzee's still out. They're the 2 best puck movers on that blue line. I worry about Utah actually being I know Utah scored, I think it's 4 in each of their last 2 games without Sergachev. Something like that, good for them. I don't think that they can keep that up. So I do think they spend a lot of time in their zone tonight with Minnesota back to near full health. I really do like Kaprizov, Zuccarello, Rossi. Again, of the expensive lines here tonight, they're at the top for me. And by top 2 stacks, they're one of the 3 lines that are at least 13 or at least 10% top 2 stack. They're at 13.3%. So they're one of the top stacks on the top 2 stacks. I think they're one of the top stacks on the night. I really do like Minnesota 1. Not playing Minnesota 2. Not playing an over-owned Minnesota line that doesn't have Kirill Kaprizov on it. That feels like DFS suicide to me. So I'm just out on that. It's Minnesota 1 for me. It's the only thing I like in this game.
10-4. Buffalo Sabres, the Skinny Swords. They have a 2.6 total. heading into Calgary, the Flames have a 3 total. If I didn't use my This Game Sucks card on the Ottawa-Boston game, I would absolutely be using it right now. This game sucks. One of the double-digit projected own lines is in this game, and it's Coleman, Coronado, Backlund. I get it because they're 12,800 going up against Buffalo. They haven't announced the starter, but I would imagine it's going to be Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, and he has been their best goalie this season. That does give me a little bit of pause on that ownership here because it's not like they're creating and scoring a ton, right? They have 2.7 expected goals, 2.9 actual goals. Like, that's fine. But I don't think I want to play chalk Calgary. It's the same thing that we say about chalk Islanders. Like, if this line beats me here tonight, so be it. I don't want to play that line. I think, the Kadri line is all right. Kadri, Huberdeau, Pospisil. They're 13,900, but they're also pretty negatively leveraged, coming in at 9% projected with a 4% top 2 stack. So, like, the Flames are always chalky when they're favored because they're so cheap. I don't know, man. I'm just kind of hoping that Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen can keep this game within its grasp, and I'll let other people play Calgary here on an 11-game slate. And the same token, I don't have a ton of interest in Buffalo because, 1, Dustin Wolf is in net, and 2, all of these lines for Calgary, despite their offensive woes or prowess, whatever you want to say, are all good defensively. If anything, I would go to Thompson, Peterka, Kulich at 15,400. They'll see the back on line. If this line was like 2-3%, I'd probably have more interest because they're just, like I said, there's a bevy of lines from 14 to 16 to 17K. So it's hard to prioritize them. That's more of an MME play. I think I'm going to treat this game as MME and hope that chalk Calgary doesn't get there.
Yeah, I mean, the line I would play from the Flames is Backlund, Coleman, Coronado. Like, the offensive numbers aren't like elite or anything, but they are good, especially when you're considering that Calgary's not a good 5-on-5 offensive team. Like, even being, 15% above the league average is good for them. And they do get ice time. They get 18, 19 minutes a game. Matt Coronado averaging 3 shots per game over his last 15 games. The case I'll make for Backlund, Coronado, Coleman, even with all that ownership, is like there's not a whole lot for cheap fillers here tonight, right? We'll get to the San Jose game in a second. There might be something there. We'll get to the Seattle game. There might be something there, but otherwise you're looking at one of the Carolina lines. You're looking at the Robert Thomas line from St. Louis. One of those depth line from the Rangers, I guess, are okay. Second and third lines from like Pittsburgh and Montreal. Like, there's just not a ton that I really want to target. So in that sense, I think that Coleman, Backlund, Coronado line is fine. I'll tell you right now, I'm not playing them. Like, I'm with you. Like, I'm just hoping Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen just doesn't blow up. I think one off Kadri is perfectly fine. One off Coronado, like those types of things. As far as full stacking goes, I think I'm out. The case that I'll make for Buffalo is, yes, I agree with you. There are other lines in that price range that I think I would rather play. Like, I would certainly rather play Montreal. I would certainly rather play Detroit. I would certainly rather play Ottawa. The case I'll make is that they've been a good line, and it's like Thompson and Kulich, and in a small sample, have been good together. 71 shot attempts, 3.2 expected goals, 5.2 actual goals per 60 minutes in 60 minutes together. Kulich is a guy I've been waiting for a breakout from him as a young player. He's not a good playmaker, but he is a good shooter, and he is good at transitioning defense into offense. And they have Peterka on the line, and he is a good playmaker. So I think he can kind of be the distributor for the other two. It's one of those things, like, this is a line that I think would be good long-term. I also think this is a bad matchup going up against Coleman and facing Dustin Wolf. What I will say is that the Buffalo power play has been better, riding a bit hot by shooting percentage, but they have been better. And the Calgary penalty kill, I mentioned it earlier in the show, has given up the most goals against per game in the league this season. So I don't hate the idea of playing Peterka, Thompson, Kulich. If I was 20 maxing, if I was 150 maxing, I would probably come in at the field close to that. If I was 20 maxing, maybe I'd have one to 5 max. It's like there are a few other lines that I have higher in my priority list, but I do think they're fine. They'd actually be my favorite line to play in this game. I don't think I'm playing either side here, though, generally speaking. I'm just kind of hoping this ends up a low-scoring game.
Yeah, and as we were talking, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen is expected to start, so that's good news, because if it was like Reimer or Levi, as much as we like Levi, he's been on the struggle bus. Vancouver Canucks with a 2.5 total. Heading into Edmonton, the Oilers have a 3.1. Edmonton going Draisaitl, Arvidsson, Podkolzin, Hyman, Henry, Corey Perry, Nugent Hopkins, Connor Brown, Matthias Janmark. Yikes. Vancouver going Miller, Garland, Suter, Pettersson, Besser, DeBrusk. I'm out on full stacking anything from Vancouver. I don't care if it's Calvin Pickard in net or not. Like, the Miller line has been bad. The Pettersson line has been bad. You want a one-off Brock Besser? You want a one-off Connor Garland? Fine. I'm not full stacking anything from Vancouver here tonight. On the Edmonton side, the only line I have interest in full stacking is Draisaitl, Arvidsson, Podkolzin at 17-1, 8.2% top 2 stack, 9.3% projected ownership. They continue to roll 3.6 expected goals for per 60, 185-minute sample. Arvidsson's now on the top power play unit while McDavid is crying about his suspension. I like them. Listen, that Pettersson line isn't great defensively. If they see the Miller line hasn't been great defensively. I do worry a little bit about, that Draisaitl line going out against the Quinn Hughes line, but this team just looks lost. So I'm fine with Draisaitl, Arvidsson, Podkolzin here. You want to one-off Hyman, you want to one-off Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. Sure, this isn't the best power play matchup. It is Demko and net. So the only line I have any interest in full stacking is the Draisaitl line.
Yeah, I think the case for the Elias Pettersson line is this is probably maybe been his best line combination this season. Mm-hmm. He has 115 minutes with Besser and DeBrusk as his wingers, 2.2 expected goals, 3.1 actual goals, shooting 10%. Pettersson almost always outscores his expected goals metrics. He's just one of those players that does that. And that they're scoring over 3 goals per 60 while shooting 10% tells me they're basically right in line. But again, that's another one of those lines in that price range with Detroit, with Montreal, with Ottawa, even with Vegas 2 that we talked about earlier. If you want to play Boston or Philly, it's in that price range too. There are just other lines. The case is this has been probably Pettersson's best 5-on-5 line, and there's no ownership on them. Absolutely none. So in that sense, anything can happen in a single game, Lord knows, especially when one of those teams is the Edmonton Oilers. So if I was 150 maxing, I would probably have a 2 or 3 Vancouver of that Pettersson line here, just because they have been good at 5-on-5, and we've seen the Oilers blow up from time to time. So 150 max, I think they're in play. Other than that, I'm out on Vancouver. I agree with you on that Draisaitl, Arvidsson, Podkolzin line. What I worry about is that, generally speaking, over the last few years, whenever McDavid's missed time, the Edmonton power play's just gone to complete shit. You could say Victor Arvidsson's getting top power play time now, but if the power play's half as good as it was with McDavid there, it's how valuable is that power play time actually? You know what I mean? So I don't mind that Draisaitl, Arvidsson, Podkolzin line. They've been really good all season. Since Arvidsson returned, they're at 3.3 goals per 60 minutes at 5-on-5, which off the top of my head would be something like 33% above the league average, and their shooting percent is below league average. That's how many shots they're generating on a per minute basis. This line just fires pucks at will, and they create good quality. The question is whether they can finish. Thatcher Demko is in net again, and we know Thatcher Demko has struggled basically since returning from injury. He's had a good game here and there. But he has generally struggled since coming back. So I don't mind that Draisaitl, Arvidsson, Podkolzin line. You want to take off Podkolzin and put in like Hyman or RNH for additional power play correlation. I think that's okay, but I'm not targeting Edmonton for the power play spot here tonight. I'm targeting them because that's been a really good 5-on-5 line going up against a goalie that's very much struggled this season. So Draisaitl, Arvidsson, Podkolzin for me is the only thing I have any real interest in. Going to be honest, I think my favorite thing in this game might just be playing one-off Leon Draisaitl. That guy, he played 24 minutes the other night. He might play 25 here tonight. So I like the idea of a Draisaitl one-off perfectly fine.
Yeah, that Draisaitl line's like that Danny DeVito gif. So anyway, I started blasting.
Yeah. Exactly.
Pittsburgh Penguins with a 3.3 total heading into Anaheim. Los Patos, they have a 2.8 total. Ricard Raquel is back for Pittsburgh. He's on the top line with Crosby and Rust, Malkin, Bunting, Glass. Ducks going Vetrano, Terry Strome, Zegras, Carlson, Killorn, Gauthier, Fabry, Jansen, Harkins. I like Pittsburgh one here. Their power play has been better since they've put Bunting and Grzelcyk on and have taken Malkin and Carlson off. Here's the issue. They're 21,700, and in the last 3 games, the most time on ice from one of those players was 18 and a half minutes from Brian Rust. Crosby's last 3 games have been 17 minutes. Raquel has played 16 in a couple of them. So if they're like 18-9, 19-3, I'd be like, this is a great spot at 4.8% projected ownership. This still is a really good spot. I just don't know if I can justify the $21,700 price tag. I generally, when you're paying that much, you want 19, 20, 21 plus minutes. Can they still get there? Yes, because the Ducks penalty kill is atrocious. And it's a good 5-on-5 matchup in that Crosby line. Crosby and Rust in their past few years have, even since Gensel's gotten traded, they have been very, very good offensively. The minutes is the only thing holding me back in single entry. I think they're a very good play across the board. The minutes is a concern. You want to one-off Bunting, I think that's fine. He's under 4K. He shoots. He's on the power play. It's a good power play matchup. I don't want a full stack Malkin, Bunting, Glass, though. On the Duck side, Vetrano, Terry Strome projected over 10% at 12%, 6.2% top 2 stack, 12% projected ownership. Listen, I like that line. We are Ducks enthusiasts. Going back to the COVID bubble season, we were like playing the Ducks every night. I don't want to play a 12% Vetrano, Terry Strome. I don't think I can do it. Like, if anything, like a one-off Terry, one-off Vetrano, I think is fine. I just like that ownership on the Ducks is a tad extreme for me. Carlson Zegras 2-man is interesting because it's not like Pittsburgh is a good defensive team as you go down the lineup. They've generally been okay this season. I think Fabry Gauthier as a 2-man is fine. Like, ownership agnostic, obviously Vetrano, Terry Strome, my favorite on the Duck side. You throw in ownership, I think like a Carlson Zegras 2-man is where I'd go. Pittsburgh 1 is my favorite line in this game, but there's legitimate minutes concerns comparative to the price.
Yeah, it's not that I don't like Pittsburgh 1. They've generally been good offensively this season. They've gone a little cold lately. They're shooting 8% since Christmas. That worries me because this is a team with players that have had shooting percentage issues for a few years now. And I'm worried that they basically just had kind of like a 6-week percentage bender. And now they're going to go back to what they've been for the last 2.5 years rather than the last 6 weeks representing a new normal. We talk about players like Elias Pettersson who generally outperforms his expected goals numbers. Like, nobody's been better at underperforming their expected goals numbers over the last couple seasons than the Pittsburgh Penguins. So that's what I worry about. It is a great matchup of 5-on-5. Like, that Anaheim top line, the Anaheim top line over the last 15 games, 4.1 expected goals against per 60. You almost never see that from a full line forward line combination because if that does happen for a few games, the coach kind of notices and breaks them up. But Greg Cronin's something special. Now, they're not allowing a ton of goals because the goaltending obviously has been really good for Anaheim this season. So I have no problem playing Pittsburgh one. The thing is like if I'm playing an over 20K line here tonight, I'm going to Minnesota. Like I said earlier, they're at the top of my priority list for the expensive lines here tonight. So no issue with Pittsburgh one per se. There's just another line that I like better in that price range. I agree with you. I'm not full stacking. I feel like this is a night where I'm going to say I don't want to full stack Pittsburgh 2, and then that line has 2 goals and 4 assists and a shot bonus tonight. You know what I mean? That just feels like one of those nights going up against the Anaheim depth. But yeah, one off Michael Bunting, perfectly fine. On the Anaheim side, I don't mind Vetrano, Terry Strome. The reason I don't mind them at 12% ownership is because they're 13,900, right? They're perfectly correlated. They'll probably play 18 minutes. Like, I do worry that their ice time is going to go down with Zegras back now, and that they're basically going to roll 3 even lines, even-ish, and do what Montreal did when Line 8 came back, is that every forward is going to play between 11 and 18 minutes or something like that. I do worry about that, but they've been good offensively. Even recently, they've been good offensively. They're under 14K. I'd rather play them than Calgary. I'll say that much. Either of the Calgary lines. So Vetrano, Terry Strome, I think, is fine. What I will shout out is Zegras, Karlsson, Killorn. Zegras and Karlsson together this season hasn't been a huge sample because Karlsson missed some time, but 2.1 expected goals for isn't great, but Zegras is a guy whose playmaking can help outscore the expected goals numbers. They're perfectly correlated on the power play as well. And while the power play for Anaheim generally hasn't been very good, Pittsburgh's penalty kill until very recently hasn't typically been very good either. So they are a perfectly correlated line under 10K. If for some reason you do need a line that cheap, I think that's where I would go. But it's Anaheim 1 I would probably play in this game, and I have no issue playing Pittsburgh 1. There's just another line that I prefer in that price range.
Washington Capitals with a 2.9 total heading into Seattle. The Kraken have a 2.6. Washington going Ovechkin, Strome, McMichael, Wilson, Dubois, Protas. Seattle going Benier, Schwartz, Kakko, Bjorkstrand, Stevenson, Burakovsky, McCann, Wright, Tolvanen. I know Washington has the bigger total. They're favored. But, I just don't have a ton of interest in that top line. They've been pretty brutal together this season on both ends of the ice. If anything, I go to Dubois, Wilson, Protas at 14-1, 1.8% projected. I haven't seen confirmation on a goalie starter if it's the cord.
They didn't confirm the goalie, but they did say Grubauer stayed on to do work with a goalie coach after the optional skate. So it would seem to indicate that the cord is starting, but it's not officially confirmed.
That helps because if it was Grubauer, it's just gonna be like,
I had a search bar up with Grubauer's name in it for the last 90 minutes, just constantly refreshing it.
It's like, please let it be Decord. I would have some interest in Wilson, Dubois, Protas, and MME at 14-1. The season Dubois is having is very underrated. Wilson's arguably been their best forward this season. Protas is just a model of consistency. So that would be the one line. Strome, Ovechkin, McMichael have been brutal. So I'm out on them. On the Seattle side, Benier, Schwartz, Kakko at 12,900. Gonna see that Strome Ovechkin matchup, and boy, oh boy, have Ovechkin, Strome, McMichael been bad defensively. Almost 70 minutes, 4.6 expected goals against per 60, 0.9 actual, because Logan Thompson has been an absolute machine in net, but it is Uncle Chuck, Charlie Lindgren in net tonight. And while I'm a Charlie Lindgren enthusiast, he's not having nearly as good a season as Logan Thompson. Benier, Schwartz, Kakko in a fairly large sample, 2.7 expected goals for, 3.7 actual. They've been really, really good. you give Capo Caco minutes and look what happens. Rangers, you idiots. But anyway, for 12,900, I am in on them, especially getting that matchup without Logan Thompson. You want to play Chandler Stevenson line? Be my guest. That's not something I'm interested in. I wish Wright, Tolvin, and Bjorkstrand were together, because since they swapped Bjorkstrand and McCann, that Wright Tolvanen line hasn't been very good at all. So the only line of interest for me really is Beniers, Schwartz, Kakko.
Yeah. Lindgren and Decord starting for these teams is really important for this game. We kind of, laughed at Grubauer and Decord. Philip Grubauer, minus 12 goals saved above expected in 20 games this season. Joey Decord, 11 goals saved above expected in 30 games. So minus 12 for Grubauer, plus 11 for Decord. It's preposterous. And if you look at Lindgren and Thompson on a 60-minute basis, Logan Thompson's at nearly 1 goal saved above expected per 60. He's at 0.97. It's just absolutely like a great goalie over a big sample will be at like 0.5, 0.6. He's at almost 1. And Lindgren is in the negatives. So every 60 minutes that Thompson plays instead of Lindgren saves the Caps over a goal. Like, it is a monster difference between these starters and backups on both sides. So, I have no interest in Ovechkin, Strome, McMichael. That line has been bad, generally speaking. You mentioned that. Even with Protas, they were at 3 expected goals against per 60 at 5-on-5. Strome and Ovechkin were. It was just that Logan Thompson was has just played out of his mind and kept the goals against down for him. Not the case with Charlie. I mean, hey, listen, Charlie Lindgren could have a 31 save shutout here tonight. That's the way goaltending goes. I'm just thinking, if they play this game 100 times, then what happens? I would bet that Lindgren does considerably worse than Thompson. So no interest in Washington 1 against that Beniers matchup with Decord in net. Washington 2 would be the interest. That line, 2.9 expected goals, 4.5 actual goals per 60. Tom Wilson, 2.3, 2.4 shots per game over his last 20 games. So he's shooting. He gets power play time. I think they're fine. If you want to avoid the chalk in the mid-price range, we just talked about that Anaheim top line that is similarly priced. That is 12%. Well, these guys are 2%. It's one of those pivots that you can go to. But I'm not super excited for the Caps, any of their lines here tonight. For me, this is about this. And the other reason, why I would don't mind the Dubois line is they'll see a lot of that Stevenson line. And every single line with Chandler Stevenson on has sucked ass this year. So it's a pretty good matchup for Dubois, Wilson, and Protas here tonight. I don't mind that. So for that reason, I think they're in play. If you're playing 150, I would definitely be considering that line. But for me, this game is about Seattle. Beniers, Schwartz, and Kakko is where I would go. They're going to match up against that Strome line, which has just been a horror show defensively. Now they don't get Logan Thompson to bail them out period after period. You mentioned how good that Kakko line has been. 2.7 expected goals, 3.7 actual goals per 60. They're getting ice time. They're all skating between 18 and 20 minutes over the last 5 games. That's a lot of ice time for the Seattle Kraken. Schwartz and Beniers both on the top power play unit together. That power play unit's not been great, but it's at least close to league average, which a lot of Seattle power play units have not been. So, there's something there. They're only coming in at 2.2% ownership. If you don't want to play super chalky Calgary or whatever, Beniers, Schwartz, and Kakko is the line that I would probably pivot to, or at least one of them. That's my favorite line in this game. If you want to play one of the other Seattle lines, fill your boots. But for me, this is about Seattle 1, maybe Washington 2 if you're playing a bunch of lineups.
Yep. Oh, late hammer season. Nashville Predators with a 3.6 total. Heading into San Jose, the Sharks have a 2.4. 2 bits of big news for the Sharks here. Tyler Toffoli is back. He's going to be with Celebrini and Eklund. That line is fully correlated. And 2, it is not Georgiev in net. It is Askarov. And Askarov is the truth and the light. I mean, he's still a rookie, but he is much better than Georgiev. He has a 912 save percentage on the Sharks. Vezina, baby. Here's the thing, right? On the 8-game slate on Tuesday, Forsberg, Marchessault, Stamkos were projected at 37%. We saw it in single entry. Some of them pushed 50%. That's just bonkers. But they were like 18,400. They're 21,900 here tonight. And yes, the Sharks are still pretty bad defensively, but the upgrade from Georgiev to Askarov is like going from Grubauer to Decord. So Nashville one still has a 24.4% top two stack with 14.2% projected ownership. I mentioned at the beginning of the show that of the 4 lines above 10%, 3 were the easy fades for me in single entry. This is the one that's not an easy fade because at the beginning of the season, the first like 27, 37 games, something like that, Nashville was the lowest scoring team in the season. Over their last like 15 games, by expected goals, they're one of the highest. This is a very, very good power play matchup. They are fully correlated. Now they're 21,900. That helps if you're looking to fade them. That is expensive. I'd rather play Minnesota here. I get going back to them because, they absolutely just nuked on the power play. And it's still very possible, but I have so much more faith in Askarov having a decent game than I did Georgiev. For me, I haven't decided yet, but this isn't like the auto lock it was on Tuesday. You have to make a decision here because they are $3,000 more expensive, and there's a much better goalie in net for Nashville. I still think they're fine. I think I prefer Minnesota in that range. If they were 18,000 and change here again tonight, it's a much different conversation. 21,900. They would literally need a repeat of what they did the other night to pay off their price. So still fine. Definitely one of the top lines on the night, but there are reasons to fade them here. You want to go to O'Reilly, Nyquist, Hinostroza. I think that's fine at 11,000. They're coming in at 3%, but like for a line at 11,000 in that great of a matchup, how good they've been at 5-on-5, I think that's fine. On the Sharks side, I do have interest in celebrating Eklund to Foley. They are a little bit expensive. It's just another line in that 14 to 17K area. You do get Wallman back on the top power play unit now. Toffoli back helps a lot. Cliffy always says celebrating with Toffoli with anyone but Barclay Goodrow. 2.8 is expected goals for you. Add Eklund into the mix. That only helps. It's just a question of if you want to prioritize them at that price because it is going to be UC Saros. Nashville has a decent penalty kill because of Saros, but I honestly don't mind the Sharks' top line here. You want to go to Granlund, Zetterlund, Smith. That's a little bit more iffy at 12-3 because that O'Reilly Nyquist line has been very, very good. So I think it's both top lines are my favorite. And Nashville, for me, isn't the auto lock they were on Tuesday.
Yeah, I think two things can be true about Nashville. And it's kind of it reminds me of the Washington Capitals through the first 6 to 8 weeks of the season, is that they're creating well offensively and they're also riding really hot percentages. And that's when you get the absolute monster fantasy performances that you've seen from like Forsberg or Marchessault or whatever recently. The Nashville top line, 60 shot attempts, 2.8 expected goals per 60 in their full sample together. That's good. Shooting 13.5%, so they're scoring 4.4 goals per 60. That's way too high. Like even like the Tampa top line and the Toronto top line, like those top lines can't sustain that. Over the last 15 games, the Nashville power play is shooting over 30%. Think about Ottawa earlier in the season, how good that power play was for like 6 or 8 weeks, and they've done dicks since. That's just because their shooting percentage just crashed in a big way. And when you don't create a lot of shots, when your shooting percentage crashes, the goals go away. Now, do I feel good about banking on those shooting percentages starting to reverse their trend against the San Jose Sharks? I do not. But with Askarov in net, it's kind of like the cord in the Seattle situation. I feel a lot better about him not giving up like 6 goals against or whatever. For me, I'm probably like I am fading Nashville here tonight. I feel comfortable saying that there are 22 teams on the board. I certainly understand wanting to play them. They do have the highest top 2 stack. They are really expensive. I do prefer Minnesota at a cheaper price over them, but I'm not going to say, it's unreasonable to play Nashville here tonight. Of course, it's perfectly fine to play them. I'm just hoping that they go bust here tonight and that San Jose doesn't give up 6 goals in 30 minutes or whatever they did the other night. For me, I'm more interested in the San Jose side, and it's Celebrini and Eklund with Toffoli. It's not a big sample with the 3 of them together. It's only 55 minutes, but 74 shot attempts, 3.3 expected goals per 60 for Celebrini, Eklund, and Toffoli. Those numbers are better than the Nashville top line, just kind of for reference. Celebrini and Toffoli have generally, like you said, generally been able to create well with anybody except for Barclay Goodrow in their wing. Like literally anybody else on the team except for Barclay Goodrow, they've been able to create well. They're only, they're fairly cheap, so you can pair them with another line in that mid-price range like Montreal, Detroit, Philly, Ottawa, the ones we've all talked about. So I like Celebrini, Eklund, and Toffoli here tonight. They are perfectly correlated. Nashville does take penalties. Sometimes Saros can be a little leaky on the penalty kill. So I like Celebrini, Eklund, Toffoli best in this game, but I'm not going to say don't play Nashville 1. They're obviously a perfectly fine play here tonight. I'm just hoping that they don't go nuts two games in a row.
Yeah. I think I think the time their big performance was Tuesday. It kind of feels chasing, and you're spending an extra $3,000 against a legitimately good goalie. But again, they can do it. It's the Sharks when it comes down to it. Let's talk about defensemen here at the top of the board. The usual suspects: Werenski, Yossi, Hughes, Bouchard, Dahlin, Cedar, Wallman, Foxy baby. Werenski at 9,200 back-to-back on the road in Carolina. Not super ideal at 9,200. I think, for me, I'd go Yossi 1. And then really, in a single entry, I'd probably go down to Cedar, Wallman, and Fox. But, if you want to play Werenski as a low-owned, super expensive guy in MMA, fine. But I think for me, Yossi's number 1.
Yeah, I've Yossi number 1 on my personal board. And if you look at stochastic point per dollar, for the defenseman over 6K, Yossi leads point per dollar as well. Moritz Cedar right behind him. I think he's perfectly fine here in that matchup against Montreal. I don't hate the idea of playing Werenski. Feels like if Columbus does get 4 or 5 goals here tonight, he's probably going to have to get involved. I mean, he only had 1 assist yesterday, so maybe he's due. But, I think I prefer to go to Yossi or Cedar. The mid-price range, there's not a ton that I really like there. Like Spurgeon, obviously, now that he's back on the power play. Lane Hudson is in a good power play matchup of his own. Jackson Lacombe. Like, the thing with Lacombe is that he's getting a little bit lucky with his production, but he's also taking shots and blocking shots, so there's also some good peripherals there, too. Don't mind him. Chris Letang on the other side. I don't really care about power play correlation or anything like that. I think Letang in his minutes and what he can do is in play as well. So there are some guys in that mid-price range that I think are playable. For the cheaper guys, like Jacob Slavin's projecting extremely well. He's been playing some big minutes where they've not really been using the third pair a whole lot. They've been leaning on that Slavin-Burns pair. Radko Gudas is projecting well as here tonight at home against Pittsburgh. Michael Kesselring, again, running the power play for Utah. I'm not big on Utah here tonight, but he's getting more minutes and running the top power play for them. Same with Matt Grzelcyk for Pittsburgh. With Charlie Lindgren in net, I don't mind Adam Larson. He's getting over 20 minutes, and he was due for some production rebound, and he's been getting that over the last few weeks. I'll mention both Caden Gooley and David Savard from Montreal. Those guys block a lot of shots on the penalty kill, and if Detroit gets a lot of power plays tonight, they're going to have to block a lot of shots on the penalty kill. So I'll mention them. Braden Schneider is the top. I think he's the top projected defenseman under 3K on Stochastic, getting decent minutes for the Rangers, so I don't mind Schneider. Philip Hronik, I think he had 23 or 24 minutes the other night with Tyler Myers out. Probably going to get the same again here tonight. Matt Roy's under 3K again, so I don't mind Matt Roy either. And I'll mention Ian Cole as well. With Sergachev out, he might have to get some more ice time, and it's a good night for him to block a lot of shots.
Yep. Let's talk about them goalies. In the top end, I don't have a ton of interest. Like if I'm going above 8K, it would probably be Saros. I don't particularly love it, but that would be the guy. But there's a bunch of guys around that price range that I prefer anyway. Igor Shesterkin at 8K. Philip Gustafsson, 7,800. Dustin Wolf, 7,800. I don't mind Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen at 7,600. If St. Louis can stay out of the box, I don't mind Hofer at 7,400. I think the wild card here tonight is going to be Askarov. I think he is playable at 7,100. The volume's going to be there. It's just a matter of if he gives up 2 or 17. That's a little bit of hyperbole, but yeah.
But not really.
Not really. But I guess if you even need to go lower, like you can close your eyes and click in Tarasov against Carolina. That feels bad, but like those 5-on-5 lines don't exactly inspire a ton of confidence. So like Decord also at 7,300. Like there's a bunch of options 8K and under. I don't think there's a need to spend up all the way up to like Saros here tonight.
Yeah, the top projected goalie 8K or higher on DraftKings is Freddie Anderson. And I can tell you right now, I'm not playing 8,500 Freddie Anderson at home. It's just not something I'm going to do. Igor Shesterkin for me in that price range. Philip Gustafsson as well. He's a little bit cheaper, but he's projecting well. And then Dustin Wolf, I think, is in a good matchup at home against Buffalo. If you want to play UPL, I think UPL has kind of been play for Buffalo here. It's not like Calgary is typically a high-scoring team. I do worry about Buffalo defensively. Maybe UPL can't outsave a bad defensive team in front of them, but Calgary typically doesn't fill the net. So, I think he's cheap. But, I don't mind Askarov at 7,100. I honestly don't even mind Tarasov if you need to go down to 6,900. The thing is with Joey Decord sitting right there at 7,300, it's like unless I absolutely need that $200 or $400, I'm just playing Joey Decord. So I think Joey Decord is probably the bottom for me at 7,300. Also mentioned Levi Merilainen, 7,500. I think he's in net for Ottawa here tonight. It's not like Boston has typically filled the net. I do worry that Ottawa just falls flat on their face eventually. Boston did put up, 5 on them the other night, so maybe he does that again. But I think Merilainen is in play 7,500, but at that point, I'd probably rather just play Decord at 73.
Yeah, depending on GPPs tomorrow, we might be back tomorrow. We'll let you guys know in the morning. We will be back on Saturday. Who are you liking for your hat trick pick?
Going to go a little bit off the board here. I'm going to go with a guy who returned from injury recently, and I'm going to go with Trevor Zegras.
That's going to make you might have just ruined Frostback's night because now he's definitely playing him, but it's all right. I don't mind that line. I am going to go. I can't. That's just like a cop-out, so I'm not going to do it. I am going to go Tyler Toffoli. Let's get spicy.
Yeah, I like it. I do like the Sharks here tonight.
Yeah. So we'll see you possibly tomorrow, definitely on Saturday. Good luck, everybody, and we'll see you in the Discord.
Good luck tonight, everybody.